What's going on, Dominators? Rico Garcia here with another amazing episode. Today, we are going to be talking about the landscape of insurance and, more importantly, insurer fraud. We're not talking about contractor fraud. We're not talking about homeowner fraud, but fraud that is being committed or has the potential to be committed by the insurance carriers and their contractors and organizations that obviously have to participate in the insurance arena. Today, we're going to be joined by Doug. We're going to be having an in-depth conversation about things that you could do as a contractor to raise awareness, how you can participate, how you could use this also as a way to educate your customer, whether that's residential as well as commercial, and just give you a little bit of a taste of what's happening, not only here in the state of Florida, but what's happening in the state of Florida and how that is trickling to other states within the good old U.S. of A. So this is going to be an amazing episode, tons of great information. I really love what the organization is doing and how Doug is helping spearhead this entire thing alongside with his team. And I really think that you're going to get a lot of value from this information. And again, there are going to be links in the video description as well as in the show notes if you want to become a member, if you want to be part of the movement, if you want to go ahead and see things change from the insurance carrier side, then this is going to be the episode for you. So without further ado, let's jump into the show.
Welcome to the Restoration Domination Podcast, where you learn actionable advice that moves the needle and helps service-based businesses dominate. Here's your host, Rico Garcia Jr.
All right, Dominators, welcome back to another episode. Doug, thank you so much for spending the time here with us today. Are you ready to help us dominate?
You bet your ass I am.
I love it. Cool. So do me a favor, for those that may have not caught our previous episode that we did together, or they're not familiar with the name and exactly what it is that you do, fill in some of the gaps on my intro and let everybody know who you are and what you do.
Look, I was an ordinary guy living as an investment advisor on the beach, and Hurricane Sandy came in and cleaned my clock. Not a big deal. I own the maximum legal amount of insurance that I could have purchased at that time, so I figured I'd be home very shortly. My insurance company sent an engineering firm who created a fraudulent report. They committed fraud. They tried to pay me 37 cents on the dollar, and I fought for 7 years to get back home. We found out the same thing was happening to our neighbors, to our friends, to our family. It was massive fraud by the insurance industry. So we formed the American Policyholder Association to hold them legally accountable. One of the ways we actually were able to fix our situation up here was we got the Attorney General of one of our states to raid an engineering firm and seize their files, go back a couple of weeks later and walk one of their executives out in handcuffs. And even though 2,000 of us had sued, the insurance industry laughed at that. They're not too concerned about civil lawsuits, but as soon as it became a criminal prosecution, that changed everything. We're able to get 144,000 cases reopened, something to the tune of $350 million paid out to people who had been cheated. And we took that and said, you know what? This needs to be done all over the country because we're seeing the same problems. We know that civil lawsuits are a great way for the average consumer to get justice, but we're looking for market-wide effects. We're looking for all American consumers to get justice. And the way to do that is to hold fraudsters criminally accountable. And if they're fraudsters on the insurer side, we're going after them.
Yeah. And I love this conversation. Obviously, as a restoration contractor, of course, I'm going to have some bias because, again, I think that we've all had the customer who thinks it's like, oh, well, you're billing insurance. You're a fraudster. You're trying to, overcharge. You're trying to do this. It's always the contractors typically and or homeowners typically that when there's more affinity with the word fraud than the holy institutions of insurance carriers. But the reality is like nothing could be further from the truth. There's so much fraudulent activity that's going on from the insurance carrier side that I think that just now is really when the American public, especially here, I can only speak to the state of Florida because I'm in the state of Florida and we do a lot of business in the state of Florida. Just now is when Floridians are really starting to taste get a taste of what's happening with the insurance game. Just this past hurricane that hit the west coast of Florida, tons of people they haven't received a penny for something as simple as a roof tarp. Like a hurricane just hit. Like, how are you even arguing the validity and the legitimacy of a roof tarp? Like, so we're seeing a lot of this. Talk to us about what the landscape is looking like in the state of Florida, what you've uncovered, and maybe some useful bits of information that we should be, not only as contractors, but also just as homeowners, that we need to be aware of.
Wow, there's a lot to unpack in that question. Let's start with where you started, Rico. Why does it always appear as though the finger is pointing at homeowners, at contractors, at public adjusters, et cetera, for committing fraud, stealing from the insurance company? And
Yep.
P.S., that happens. It's absolutely real. But why do you only hear about that? Is because the insurance industry is the second most powerful lobby in the country. They spend on lobbying money and political contributions just below the number one most powerful lobby, which is Big Pharma. Unfortunately, in America, money translates into influence and political power, and they've got lots of it. So they are able to sort of shape the narrative. P.S., they're also one of the biggest advertisers. So they carry a lot of weight with the media. A lot of press won't carry stories that are against or maybe unfavorable to the insurance industry. So they carry a lot of juice. They basically control the narrative. And the narrative is this: it is the right hand saying, look what the left hand is doing. Look at them. And while the entire prosecution community has their attention diverted over here, nobody's watching what the insurance industry is doing. Because they have that kind of power in advertising, they have that kind of power in the media, they have that kind of power in the prosecution community. And one of the reasons why, almost all fraud prosecution is done to defend the insurance industry. There are some states where insurance fraud is only defined as somebody stealing from the insurance company. It doesn't even cover the insurance industry or their representatives stealing from the consumer.
Mm-hmm.
And basically the way it goes is, public prosecutors don't go out and look for insurance fraud. Insurance fraud cases are walked into them by insurance companies themselves. Every insurance company has what's called an SIU, a special investigation unit. It is basically a detective bureau, and they vet cases of fraud. They have inside access to claims and confidential information. And if they see somebody committing fraud, they'll walk that into to public prosecutors. In some cases, the insurance industry is actually funding public prosecutors through premium taxes, grants, etc. And for some odd reason, the insurance industry never seems to turn themselves in when they're walking these cases in. They're only turning in everybody else. So if you're a prosecutor and you're getting case after case handed to you and it's all people stealing from the insurance company, it's very easy to see that's the only kind of fraud that's happening. But the one thing I will tell you is fraud happens on all sides. There is no segment of the population based on their company, their position, what they do for a living that is immune from fraudsters. A certain percentage of the American population is willing to commit fraud, and it doesn't matter whether you're hiring a contractor or an adjuster or an insurance company claims manager or engineer or a congressman or a senator for that matter. Those fraudsters come along with the population. So while the narrative has sort of been put out there that it's everybody stealing from the insurance industry, let's protect insurance companies. And again, that's real. It happens. It costs us all money, but nobody is talking about how the insurance industry and their representatives are committing fraud to cheat consumers. And if you want to talk about the Florida landscape, we've just had whistleblowers come forward and have caught them red-handed in Florida. And there's a lot, if you follow the news in Florida, there's a lot going on down there. But, look, the APA's mission is to make sure that carrier side fraud is addressed. This one piece that nobody's talking about, this one piece that no one else is prosecuting. If you Google insurance fraud arrest, you're going to see a bunch of contractors in handcuffs in the images. You're going to see a
Right.
bunch of consumers. You're not going to see any insurance company executives,
Mm-hmm.
except for the engineering executive that the APA had prosecuted during Hurricane Sandy, or at least those of us who later went on to start the APA.
Mm-hmm.
Because nobody is going after those. No one's submitting those cases and vetting them and turning them into prosecutors. Before the APA started, it didn't happen. We're the first organization in American history focused on vetting and submitting fraud cases against the insurance industry.
How does a contractor, right? Because we understand what the landscape looks like. We understand the whole, deny and delay and those games that the insurance company plays. And as measure, what we've done as contractors is we've kind of gone out and said, okay, look, every single step I am going to document. I am going to make sure that I'm using the absolute best software that's available in my industry to not only back up exactly what it is that I'm doing and to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that there's nothing funny going on, that there's no attempts at fraud, that we're doing everything by the book. But somehow, especially here in Florida, like every day it seems like it's getting harder and harder and harder. And how do we, as a contractor or even as a homeowner, how do we start to identify what some of this potentially fraudulent behavior looks like so that we can protect ourselves against it?
Well, you touched on something, and I'll say this. Job one is your integrity has to be beyond question.
Mm-hmm.
You have to do everything right, pure ethics. You place what we call old school business values, what we learned from our parents, which is you place the best interest of the customer as number one. You don't take shortcuts. You don't look for the quick buck. You go for what's going to be in the best interest of the consumer, of your business, of the overall American economy for the long run. And you want to make sure you're teaching that to your younger employees, because while we learned old school business ethics, you can't assume that younger people coming into the workforce today learned the same from their parents. So it's important that we teach that to the next generation, because one day they'll be the ones that are owning companies. They'll be the ones that have your reputation and the reputation of your industry in their hands. The one thing we say about insurance fraud, we're not looking for insurance companies to pay $1 more than what they owe or $1 less than what they owe. All fraud is wrong. We're not here to cheat. So as long as you make sure all of your ethics and all of your staff's and employees' ethics are right on the money and are beyond question, then we're in the position to start looking at the insurance industry. So if you want to go into a situation where we say, hey, what kind of tactics do we see? I mean, I know you see them every day. It's called delay, deny, defend. As a matter of fact, there was a great book by that title written by a Rutgers University business professor called Jay Feynman up here in New Jersey. He was actually on the build team for the APA, and I'd recommend that book to anybody, Delay, Deny, Defend. As a matter of fact, Jay Feynman is coming to the APA membership summit in Dallas the first week of November to speak. We're very excited about that. But the insurance carriers, and in many cases, it's not even the carriers, it's the vendors they hire, the third-party administrators, the adjusting firms, the engineers, who have what's called check writer bias. They want to make, the person who writes the checks happy. They want to be invited back for the next job. They want to get the next $20, $50 million contract. So there's a bias for them to tell the insurance companies what they want to hear. And we know how they cheat. They basically deny that damage actually exists. Mm-hmm. They'll shoot pictures and do inspections and eliminate all the pictures of damage. They'll argue over causation and say this wasn't causation. We've seen cut and paste reports where they might use, your report from 2 years ago that showed no damage on my house and change the name. And we know this because we've seen them. Sometimes they forget to change the address, et cetera. So these are the things that go on. And, the one thing I want to caution everybody is this is not thugs throwing bricks through jewelry store windows. This is white collar crime. These are smart people doing devious things, and they know how to cover their tracks. So with white collar crime, you may not see the evidence. You're not going to see the fire. You might not even see the smoke. You might get a whiff of smoke. And if your gut tells you, if you're a long-term professional, your gut tells you something's wrong, then take the time to dig into it. And if you're an APA member, you log on and you submit it to us, and we have the first ever SIU that's built to defend you, to defend your customers, to actually vet cases against the insurance company. And it's run by 20, 30-year law enforcement professionals. Our head, what's known as our National Prosecution Coordinator, is a retired chief deputy district attorney who ran a fraud unit with a $13 million a year budget to investigate insurance fraud. So we've got some very sharp people, but you've got to watch, and also you've got to be careful, because the way things are set up, if you go too hard against the insurance industry, sometimes you might find yourselves being the target of an investigation.
That's a very good point. And actually, I want you to go ahead and expand on that, right? Like, when do we know when the right time to push is? Because again, a lot of contractors, depending on the size of their organization, they don't necessarily want to pick that fight. They just kind of want to go ahead and get whatever it is that they can get, move on to the next deal. They just write it off as a bad experience, and then they're off to the next one. So how does the fraud department work? And how do we know when we should, in fact, be pushing as hard as we can? But before you answer that, let's just take a quick moment to thank our Dominators. Let's face it, your company will make it or break it on the backs of your estimating team. But if we're honest here for a second, what tools have you actually given them to succeed? The Actionable Profile is the newest tool inside of your estimator's toolbox, or at the very least, it should be. The Actionable Xactimate Profile is a data-driven solution that provides real-time estimating guidance on the fly. It checks for both overages, omissions in your estimates in real time, leading your team to having much more accurate scopes each and every single time that they're writing an estimate. Avoid any kind of potential conflicts with the adjuster, and ensure that your estimates include every single warranted line item with the Actionable Xactimate Profile. Get your free demo today. If you head on over to value.getinsights.org/dominate, we've got an amazing offer for you. Again, head on over to value.getinsights.org/dominate and get your free demo today. Hey, Dominators, most owners with an agent marketer hope that they're getting a return on their investment, but really have no idea how many referrals they're actually getting from individual agencies. You see, agent marketers are not sales professionals. Jerry Edel is a specialist at referral revenue from insurance agents. He started back in the 70s as a restoration technician, and 34 years later ended up as the national sales trainer for one of the largest restoration franchise companies here in the US. And for the past 16 years, he's helped restorers succeed at creating long-term referral revenue from insurance agents. Agent marketers are in-person advertisers. Agent sales professionals are job generators when they actually have a strategy. Who do you have working for you? Do they have the tools that they need to capture the market share that's available to you? This is what I want you to do. I want you to talk to Jerry. Click the link to schedule a free call. Up-level your profitability today. Hey, Dominator, did you know that it takes about 45 days for most contractors to get paid on emergency service jobs? And some contractors report much longer wait times than that. Either way, it's a long time, especially when you start adding in all of the stress that you have to do to keep up with payroll, overhead costs, and everything that goes along with just running a business. Well, One Claim Solutions is an insurance billing specialist that not only gets their clients paid in 32 days on average, but it also improves their profitability, and above and beyond that, it also handles all of the communications with the adjusters. One Claim Solutions was actually founded back in 2016, and since then, they've been able to process hundreds of millions of dollars in insurance invoices on behalf of their clients. Listen, you deserve to work with a specialist that has well-trained attorneys as well as staff, and also they have proprietary purpose-built technology with some really rigorous time-proven processes that's needed to deliver a best-in-class insurance billing experience. One Claim Solutions will handle it all so that you can focus on really what matters most, which is running your business. Head on over to oneclaimsolution.com/dominate. Again, that's oneclaimsolution.com/dominate. Book your free consultation today. Hey, Dominators, did you know that about 80% of businesses are actually unsellable? This is why you need to let Restoration Brokers of America work with you to ensure that you maximize the value of your business when you decide that it's time for a change. All you have to do is visit sellmyrestorationbusiness.com for more information. You've worked hard to build it. Now let RBA work hard to sell it. Are you tired of managing salespeople? And let's be honest, I mean, sometimes you even really feel like you know what you're doing when it comes down to managing a sales team. And this is where Wylander comes in. With over 40 years of sales management experience, they can do it for you. And the best part is they can do it for a fraction of the cost of hiring a full-time sales manager. So listen, do yourself a favor. Call Wylander today and see what a difference a real sales manager can do for your company. All right, Dominators, we are back. So we're left with the question, how does it work? And then when do we know how to actually push?
Well, you shouldn't be pushing because, again, here's what I tell people. If you are a leader in your market and you are getting people paid for their claims, not that you are actually doing that, you're not, allowed to obviously advocate for people on claims, but you're submitting and you charge and they're actually getting their stuff paid for, and you're charging a decent rate where you can afford to feed your family and your workers can afford to feed their family. Eventually, you may find yourself a target. If you cost the insurance industry money, it's very easy for you to find yourself a target. If you're submitting complaints against the insurance industry to the Department of Insurance, et cetera, you may eventually find yourself a target. So this is where the APA comes in, because we came to fight these fights. We stepped up. We signed up for it. We have things in place to shield us from liability, and they can't come after us. And if they come after us, please try it, because I would love the opportunity to stand up in open court on the public record and share about the things that we see every single day. So, look, if you're a restoration professional and you're seeing where your consumers are getting cheated, and you have to understand this is a theft, not just from your customers. It is a theft from you as well, because of the time and energy you have to spend. Like, I talk to some people who have whole departments just dedicated to trying to get paid by the insurance company. Yeah. That's a huge amount of resources. That's a huge amount of time and energy. So it is not just a theft from your customer. It is a theft from you, and it is a theft from the American economy as a whole. You're not manufacturing widgets. This time and energy is not going into producing anything or pushing the American economy forward. It's a drain. It's a drain just to get an insurance company to pay and honor the commitment they made when the consumer paid their premiums. So it's important that we do something about it. It's important that we step up. And I know a lot of you don't have the time and the energy. Sometimes it's better to write it off and go. But, look, here's what we know from law enforcement. We don't leave a rapist on the street, because their next victim might be your family member. Right. It might be somebody in your community. These people have lost the right to have an American family's financial well-being in their hand, to have that fiduciary responsibility. They've lost that right, and they need to be investigated and, where necessary, prosecuted and removed from the industry. Because for every fraudster who's working for a TPA, an engineering firm, an insurance company, for every one of them, there's a good, solid American who's willing to come in and work hard and do honest work sitting on the sidelines. So we need to remove the fraudsters, and we need to get the good, solid, honest people in there so that they can work and they can support their families. Because in reality, how do you compete with somebody who's willing to cheat and tell the insurance company whatever they want to hear? If you're running an honest adjusting firm, if you're running an honest third-party administrator, an honest engineering firm, you have no competitive advantage. How do you stand up and compete with the engineering firm or the TPA who's willing to cut corners and cheat people to save the carrier money?
Yeah, so in some of these organizations, right on their website, it says we save on average X amount of percentage to the carrier. So you sit there and you say, okay, what's your unique selling proposition? Your unique selling proposition is that regardless of what invoices I am getting, I'm going to find a way to save you 10, 15, 20, 30%. Well, that means that even if you're getting honest estimates and honest invoices, you're doing everything humanly possible to break that down and say and dismiss it and say no, get third party reviews that of course are also on the payroll, and they don't want to bite the hands that feeds them. So what are they going to do? They're going to start poking holes in invoices and everything else. So where does this, there's a fine line. Where is that fine line to where, insurance carriers and some of the parties that are involved, right? Where does that line like actually break and be like, okay, well, this was questionable to this is just outright wrong. Like, I think that any contractor who's been in the business a while, any homeowner that has had to put in insurance claims, for the most part, has had the experience of like, this is just outright wrong. I don't feel like I'm getting a fair shake. But from there to move into the new camp that can be considered fraud, where is that line?
It's every state has their own penal code. I've looked at all 50 states' penal codes. And the easiest way to clarify it is fraud is basically three components. And I'm simplifying here, okay?
Of course.
Florida, believe it or not, has much stricter laws. Florida has great laws for fraud in place. We just wish they would enforce them a little more effectively against the insurance industry. But it's basically three things. Fraud is defined as intentional deceit for a profit or to avoid a loss. So there has to be those three things. Intent. It can't be, oops, I made a mistake. It's got to be deceit, right? And then it has to be for a profit or to avoid a loss. And that's the simplest way when you're in the street and you can see it. Because look, people do make mistakes. Engineering firms do make mistakes. Adjusters do make mistakes. Insurance companies do make mistakes and leave something off. But when we look and say, here's your last 100 mistakes, 100 of them are in favor of the insurance company. Mm-hmm. Now we know it's not, oops, I made a mistake, because you flip a coin, it should land heads 50% of the time and tails 50% of the time. But when we start to see all of your mistakes are in favor of the insurance company and supporting your value proposition of how you're going to save them money, now we're not talking, oops, I made a mistake. Now we're talking patterns and practices and an active engagement in systemic fraud. So, one of the things we do is the APA proposition is, I'll say this to make it simple. You're not allowed to be in my position in the APA if you make any money in the claims business. You can't be on our board of directors if you're in the claims business in the APA, if you make any profit. You can't be an attorney, public adjuster. You can't be anything, right? Contractor in doing insurance claims. And that eliminates any conflict of interest. That eliminates any profit motive. That eliminates any worries by our members that, hey, are they just doing this to pump up business for themselves? We're not even allowed to give referrals. I have people every day saying, hey, can you refer an attorney? Can you refer an honest contractor? We are not allowed to do that. Okay? Mm-hmm. We do encourage our members to do business with each other, member to member business, absolutely. But, if somebody calls me up and says, hey, can you refer, a good restoration contractor? I can't say, go see my boy Rico. Mm-hmm. I've been told I would be fired if I did that. So we're very serious about our integrity. The negative on that is I'm not in the trenches. We are not, you are the boots on the ground in the trenches. So it is actually our members who, with our model, are the ones that actually see the fraud and turn it into us. And we know a lot of people don't understand what fraud is. I've spoke to even attorneys who don't understand. But if you see something that's basic, intentional deceit for a profit or to avoid a loss, then you have a good case. So our members will turn in the case. It gets investigated by our what's called our CPU. It's our version of SIU. It's a Consumer Protection Unit. Very sharp people. And to be fair, most cases that come to us either are not defined as fraud, or we know there's fraud, but there's not enough proof. In the end, we have to take this to a prosecutor.
Right.
Who's got to use his limited time and resources and personnel on something. And the one promise we make to them is, we're not going to turn a garbage case into you. Right. If we don't think, that like our own head is a former prosecutor himself, and he says, if this isn't a case I would have taken, I won't refer it to you.
Right.
So we know that if we send them a bad case, they'll never talk to us again. They won't look at even the good cases. So we're very strict. We err on the side of caution. Mm-hmm. But our members turn it into the APA. Now you're off the hot seat, okay? Because again, if you point too many fingers at the insurance industry, it's going to come out. We see it a lot with public adjusters.
Mm-hmm.
If a public adjuster turn in multiple cases, complaints to the Department of Insurance in many states, some states worse than others, and they won't go after the insurance company, we find out that public adjuster is now being investigated. So the APA is here to take that heat. You turn it into us, and then if we see that there's potential crime and it's worthy of a criminal referral, we will turn it into public prosecutors. And if they have a problem with it, let them try and come after us.
And how does that process work? They submit it. Do you have to be a member? How does that work?
Well, consumers can join for free, right? Mm-hmm. Professionals or members, it's $84 a month. It's basically a cup of coffee a day. And I'm not talking fancy stuff like Starbucks. I'm talking Wawa. You guys have Wawas in Florida now.
Of course we do, yeah.
7-Eleven, it's a cup of coffee a day. And you're a professional member, and you submit this on behalf of your consumers. And you can also sign up your consumers for free. It's called an associate membership. And then a member submits it, and it gets vetted by our team. Our team will look at it. They will look at the proof that you submit. They will call you and interview you. They may call witnesses and interview them. And if they see enough, basically to say this is something that should be investigated, they're not even going to come up and say, yes, this is fraud. No, this is fraud. That's for a public prosecutor to determine, or that's for a jury to determine. But we will say, you know what, there's enough merit in this case that it should be examined, it should be investigated, and then we will send it directly to a public prosecutor. And in reality, every state has what's called an investigating body and a prosecuting body. Florida has multiples of both, believe it or not. But when it works ideally, it will go into the DFS, Division of Financial Services Fraud Prosecutors in Florida. And if they are investigators, and if they see it, they will turn it over to either the state's attorney or Ashley Moody, the attorney general, for prosecution. And different states have different investigative bodies, different prosecuting bodies. In general, we prefer to work with the attorney general. AGs are usually the top law enforcement official in any state. They have a lot of power. They have a lot of influence. They have a lot of ability to handle a complex crime, which is basically, it's white collar crime. They have the investigating authority. Attorney generals have taken on some very powerful. AGs are the ones that brought down the big tobacco settlement. They're going after big tech now. They're the ones that found out, that Volkswagen was, forging the readings on the testing. So they have, great power. They work together in many cases, and they have a great ability to handle a complicated, expensive, and perhaps dangerous to your career insurer fraud case. The one thing you have to understand is the insurance industry has a lot of money, and the one thing you don't want to do is make them too angry at you, because next time you run for office, they're going to fund your opponent.
Right. How's the journey for an organization such as yourself? Because I feel that there's a lot of education that's going into this, right? Not only do you have the contractor that should be educated, but I feel that the contractors kind of understand this a lot better, because they're doing, multiple claims a day, and they're constantly dealing. They're again, boots on the ground, like you said, and they're constantly dealing with this. But then you have the homeowner that maybe this is their first claim. They haven't been through the ringer yet. How does the education standpoint? How does that pan out for you guys, and making sure that residents of the state of Florida and just abroad are asking better questions? And then how is the approach to educate more contractors to ask better questions and to have a better an eye out, if you will, for this kind of behavior?
Well, education has been a huge part of this, and honestly, it's a part we really didn't expect to play such a big role. We just passed our 5-year anniversary. So it has been very interesting and challenging building an organization that's never existed before. It's not like I can go on YouTube. I can go on YouTube and learn how to be a roofer. I can go on YouTube and learn how to, be a brain surgeon if I want. But this doesn't exist because no one's ever done it before. And on top of that, we have to start building relationships with prosecutors and elected officials, because you can't walk in and say, hey, you've never heard of me before. You've never heard of my organization. But here's a criminal case against one of the most powerful industries in the country, and good luck getting elected next year, if you piss them off and they fund your opponent. And P.S.
Right.
Prosecutors will do the right thing. They just have to trust you. There's got to be a relationship, and they have to be educated. So I've flown, the first couple of years was flying all over the country, speaking at conferences, which we still do, meeting with elected officials, meeting with prosecutors, and explaining to them, do you know that the insurance industry commits fraud too? And we know because we are trained to watch eye contact, body language, the words that they use, their tone of voice. I know in a majority of them, I'm the first person that's ever said those words to them because they've only heard from insurance industry lobbyists their whole career. And the insurance industry has had a huge, huge head start pushing this narrative that all fraud is people stealing from the insurance company. It's those dirty, dirty contractors. By the way, just a couple of weeks ago, we had Contractor Fraud Awareness Week, sponsored by the National Insurance Crime Bureau, which is funded in part, if not mostly, by the insurance industry. Did you guys celebrate on your show? Contractor Fraud Awareness Week? Did you have a barbecue? Or
No, we didn't. Unfortunately.
Right. So, and if you go into any disaster zone, you will see signs all over the place. Billboard signs saying, report crooked contractors, report contractor fraud, right?
Right.
It's this constant in the news. Again, Google insurance fraud, Google contractor arrest.
That happened recently with with this hurricane that happened on the West Coast. It was like, hey, there's a lot of like fraudsters that are coming into the state of Florida, and it's like putting everybody on edge. But never was there a mention of, hey, by the way, just make sure that you're holding your insurance carrier accountable for what's going on.
And that's a fact. As a matter of fact, our question is always, where are the signs that say report insurer fraud, report carrier side fraud? There's no billboards. There's no radio spots for that. As a matter of fact, the APA in Fort Myers, right after the storm, we personally paid for 2 billboards. I'll send you a picture if you want to show it to your audience, saying report insurer fraud to the American Policyholder Association. Just getting the message out. Insurance companies commit fraud too. And here's where do you go to report it. And I'll tell you an interesting story about the control that the insurance industry has on the media and advertising. Because we see it a lot. We see news outlets that won't pick up controversial stories against the insurance industry, or they'll tell a story, but they won't name the insurance company involved. In this case, we actually had a national billboard firm that said national, well-known billboards all over America. We sent in this, sign that basically a billboard that said, defrauded by your insurance company, ? Basically contact the APA. They said, no, we won't run that.
Right.
We don't like to run negative ads.
Oh, yeah.
But you have no problem saying report contractor fraud.
Right.
And we worked with another company. We were able to get the billboards up because the one thing I'll tell you about the APA is we came to fight and we never quit. So we did find out. And again, I'll show you a picture. You can show it to your audience if you like. But we're the only ones doing that. We're the only ones that are out there educating prosecutors, educating, the general public, educating people in the industry, educating elected officials that insurance companies commit fraud too. And by the way, if you were elected or appointed or hired to hold them legally accountable, we're going to expect you to do that. And when we see you being soft on crime committed by the insurance industry, we're going to make that publicly known. And you'll see more and more press in Florida in particular, because we do believe that the Florida regulators have been quite soft on the insurance industry. And it's time for them to sort of change their tune.
Many people would certainly agree with that statement. Now, prior to us getting on the recording, you had mentioned that there was a couple of resources that you wanted to share. What are those resources? And we will be adding links in the video description as well as in the show notes if you want to go ahead and get these resources. But I wanted you to go ahead and verbally share what exactly they can get.
Well, we've put out a lot of education literature just to sort of tie back into your education journey that we're on. And we're educating elected officials, we're educating prosecutors, we're educating the press. Believe it or not, the media is very important to educate them, and we're educating the public and people in the industry. And some of the things we've done for the public that we've made free, there's a couple of pieces on how to protect yourself from insurer fraud. There's one in particular on how to protect yourself from insurer fraud after a natural disaster, because it seems to be very prevalent there after a disaster. And then there's another one on how to self-advocate in an insurance dispute for people that maybe can't afford a public adjuster or can't afford an attorney. Here's some steps you can take to advocate for yourself and have a better odds of being successful in an insurance dispute. So we'll send you the links and you can share those with your audience. If you are an APA professional member, you should be signing up all of your consumers, and you let people know, listen, I'm not just here to make money. I support this organization and I'm here to defend you from being defrauded by your insurance company. And I have a direct pipeline to the only fraud prosecution unit or fraud investigation unit that looks into the insurance industry in American history. I have a direct line to them. I am a part of it. It's a way to distinguish yourself from your competition.
It certainly is.
Who may just be all about what am I going to do for me? You know,
Right.
we want to make clear, you know, these people are getting defrauded. The average person doesn't have the ability to stand up to $1 billion insurance company.
And it also changes the narrative too, because again, as a contractor walking into somebody's home and or business, if they are thinking even subconsciously of the word, am I going to be taken? It's fraud, whatever the case may be. Usually it's relating to you and your sales presentation. And when you're sitting there as a well-informed contractor, as an advocate for the homeowner and or the business owner, and you're saying, hey, by the way, there's this whole other element, this other beast that maybe you weren't aware of, but we're prepared for it. And also we want to make sure that you're educated on it. That changes the dynamic. I think it changes the narrative in someone's head.
Yeah. And we have members that put our logo on the sleeves of all their employees. They put them on their truck. They put them on their email. So when they're communicating with an adjuster, they kind of know these people are connected. You know, we always say it's like having, you know, somebody in your neighborhood is robbing liquor stores and you park a sheriff's car out in front of your liquor store. They're probably going to go find an easier target. And we don't want people using the APA as a threat, like, hey, you better pay this claim or else I'm going to get the APA on you. We're not here to make more money for your business. We're not here to help you win cases. We are here to eliminate fraud and in doing so, protect your consumers, who are the people that put food on your family's table. And they don't have the ability to defend themselves. We are here to defend them. And since your interests are aligned with the interest of the consumer, then there's a benefit for you as well. But again, it's, you know, a lot of people will, in their little presentation folder, they'll have APA literature in there. They'll actually make it part of their process to sign their consumers up for a free membership. It is just a way to get the message out there, because I will tell you, the other side has no problem getting the message out there about what crooked contractors are out there. You know, there's only so many times, and this is advertising, this is marketing. There's only how many times is your family, your customers, your neighbors going to see the words contractor fraud, crooked contractor, dirty contractor, pictures of contractors in orange jumpsuits and handcuffs before they start looking at you and saying, gee, I wonder if you're a criminal as well. And we know that already happens.
Right.
Your own CFO called you predators.
Right, exactly. What do you see happening in the state of Florida and moving forward, right? Like if you were, I know that you're not in the business of predictions, but there have been a lot of legislative changes. You know, there's obviously been the attack on attorney fees and all of these things. And, you know, public adjusters also are kind of on the chopping block a little bit with, there's some chatter about what they can charge, what they can't charge. Insurance carriers now are releasing public adjuster riders. In other words, hey, you know, don't even file a claim if you're going to use a public adjuster, or there's a percentage decrease there. So there's a lot of these things that are slipping through the cracks. And so number one, what have you seen on the state of Florida level? And then how much of that do you think is going to bleed over into other areas?
Well, all of it's going to bleed, and if it hasn't already, but Florida is a unique market, but we're kind of looking at it as goes Florida, so goes the nation. We're seeing a lot of the tactics that are being used in Florida, a lot of the legislation that's getting pushed through Florida is showing up elsewhere. And, you know, I just want to be clear. no matter how many TV commercials you watch to gaslight you that you're in good hands, they're on your side,
Right.
they're a good neighbor. At the time of claim, the interest of the policyholder and the interest of the insurance company are adverse. They are against each other, and it is a zero-sum solution. If they pay you $1, they lose $1. So the average consumer has how many homeowners claims in their life? One,
Right.
maybe two. Are you good at anything the first one or two times you do it? And we talked about this a little bit last time.
Yep.
You know, it's like you're 8 years old and you show up for Little League practice on the first day, and the coach gets you all together with the other 8-year-olds and says, hey, kids, we're going to play our first game this weekend. We're going to go play the Florida Marlins.
Yeah.
Good luck with that, because you're going against the insurance industry A-team of adjusters, engineers, lobbyists, billions of dollars of campaign and lobbying money spent. You know, they just have a ridiculous amount of resources that people do this all day long. And you're doing this for the first time ever. So, but who's on your side? Whose interests are aligned with the consumer at the time of claim? Your contractor, your public adjuster, your attorney. These are all people that their interests are the same as the consumer's interests. That if the consumer does better, you do better. And if I'm the insurance company, this, 900-pound gorilla, and I want to beat up on the 100-pound weakling in the neighborhood, and he's got a couple of big, powerful friends that can defend him, I'm going to try to eliminate the friends. I'm going to try to tilt the scales in my favor. So boom, let's take out the contractors. We have the state CFO call you predators. We have billboards and signs everywhere saying, watch out for contractor fraud. We had people after Hurricane Ian telling us they were afraid to sign a contract with somebody to repair their house or even do basic remediation that's hard, because they were told by their CFO, don't sign with anybody. Don't let anybody get in between you and your insurance company. So boom, we wipe out the contractors. We shut them up with a law called UPPA, where they can't, basically advocate for you on insurance. And there's pros and cons on that. I know it's controversial. Now we go after the public adjusters. We have the state CFO call them locusts. We tell them people not to sign contracts with them. The insurance company starts putting out policies with clauses that say you can't hire a public adjuster. Boom, we take that out. Boom, we take out the attorneys. We start calling them ambulance chasers. We start making up these fake statistics that nobody can justify, like Florida has 9% of the homeowners claims and 75% of the lawsuits. Nobody can justify those numbers. It's complete bullshit as far as I can say. Let me say this. It's 87.4% likelihood that it's a bullshit stat. And do we know who put that statistic out? Dave Altemeyer, who is the former Florida insurance commissioner, who left in the middle of the worst crisis the state has seen in anyone's memory. The house was on fire, and he dove out the back door 2 weeks before a law went in place that said you can't leave public service in Florida where you're regulating an industry and then go to work for that industry. And 2 weeks before that law went into effect, he suddenly resigns his position. And can we guess where Dave Altemeyer took 2 industry jobs just 3 months after that? The insurance industry.
Interesting.
So, and P.S., they've done studies to show insurance commissioners, because everyone's like, the high and mighty insurance commissioner, they're the pinnacle of integrity. Insurance commissioners go to jail and get arrested and get removed from office all the time. And there's actually several studies that show insurance commissioners who are what's called revolvers. Somewhere between 37 and 50% of insurance commissioners go to work for the insurance industry. They might do 4 years or 8 years as insurance commissioner, then they go take a high-paying job in the industry. That's called the revolving door, where people who regulate an industry go to work for that industry. And they found these revolvers, as they call him. The ones that have done that, they've gone back and examined their decisions while they were insurance commissioner and found a notorious bias in favor of the insurance industry. So in Florida, we have an insurance commissioner who's releasing statistics to show, there's excess litigation the problem with all this, I see people quote that, 9%, 78% statistic 3 times a week at least. We call it the big lie. You just say it over and over and everybody believes it.
Yeah, eventually it's just part of what it is, right?
Right. And in reality, most of the litigation and most of the insolvency reports we're seeing, or from the words of companies like farmers that are leaving the state, don't mention litigation at all. The state of Florida's own report, if you look at a recent company called Sawgrass Mutual, watch the news. You'll be seeing this in the news. We've been working on it behind the scenes for a while now. Sawgrass Mutual is the most recent insolvency report they've released, and it talks about company mismanagement, excessive payments to their own corporate affiliates. That's what drove the company under. It doesn't mention fraud or roofing scams or litigation at all. So I'm not even sure how we got on this little tangent, but what I'm saying to you is they're trying to eliminate everyone who's aligned with the policyholder. So we isolate that policyholder, and now I'm the 900-pound gorilla, and I'm picking on the 100-pound weakling in the neighborhood, and he's got no one to help him. So that's one of the reasons why you're a target. That's one of the reasons why we see all this constant advertising about, crooked contractors, and not to say it doesn't happen, right? There's peers in your industry that are crooked, but there's peers in every industry that are crooked. And your obligation is to make sure that 1, you and your people are doing honest, ethical business. And 2, maybe you find a way to get rid of the crooked ones. Maybe you help report the crooked ones. And I hate to say that, but look, I was a licensed stockbroker, right? I was a financial advisor for 30 years. And actually, some of the rules that I live by is if you see somebody else doing something dishonest or unethical, I'm obligated to turn them in.
Right.
And I kind of want to, you don't want to be a rat and blah, blah. But guess what? These people are impacting your reputation. They're some of the reasons. These people who are a minority are the ones that make my job so much harder. Because when I talk to a prosecutor and say the insurance industry and their adjusters and their engineering firms are committing fraud, they don't have to point too far to point to somebody from the contracting world who's committing fraud.
Correct.
So, like I say, your integrity, the integrity of your profession is job one. Once we have that lined up, now we're in the best position to point the finger at the insurance company and clean them up. But
where can our audience go to get more information if they want to become members, to go ahead and become members? Where is it that we can drive our audience that, maybe this is a message that's affected them personally, that, they're just tired and fed up and they want to go ahead and do more be more on the front lines of this whole thing that's happening in our industry? Where do they go sign up and show some support?
Go right to our website, apassociation.org. That's Alpha Papa, AP, the word association.org. And there's a little link for membership. And there's multiple membership types, but you'd want to go toward a professional membership because you are a professional, and you can join and be a part of. And remember, we're your voice. We're the voice for your customers, and therefore a voice for you, because no one else is getting this message out there. And if you push too hard to get it out there, you'll be a target. So, if you follow the last couple of, you talked about, change in legislation. The insurance industry has pumped a huge amount of financial campaign contributions to Florida leadership. The governor, the CFO, the Florida Republican Party, who basically runs Florida, and a lot of the legislators. And we've seen a lot of pro-insurance, anti-consumer, anti-attorney legislation get blown through. And we obviously suggest there's a connection there. We saw 3 insurance company whistleblowers come through last year, come out and say, you know what, they're changing our reports. We submitted a claim for $150,000. They reduced it to $20,000. And we see how they're fraudulently doing this. And they left our name in it to make it look like we did it. Well, Those whistleblowers testified to the Florida legislature. They met with the head of the legislature. It was in a lot of the local Florida papers. And the DFS found a way to bury it. They said, oh, we have uncooperative witnesses. They tried to sweep it under the carpet. The problem is these people were part of the APA. Their attorney was part of the APA, and they came to us and they filed a criminal referral. And we were able to get that information directly to the Washington Post. And when all the local Florida TV stations, they were able to squash that. But when it's in the Washington Post, when, the Florida insurance regulator, the federal insurance regulators are reading it, and senators and congressmen are reading it with their breakfast that morning, when it is all over the world that this is happening, they couldn't bury it anymore. All of a sudden, they rushed through to put this, Insurance Accountability Act through, which is,
right.
it kind of had good intentions, but of course, all the teeth were removed along the way. But
Right.
it was something. It did do something. There were a couple of good things that came out of that. And that's all because of the APA's effort with working with the media and a lot of other people as well, but that's, we have to get this, there's someone always says that sunlight is the best disinfectant. Some historical figure, I can't put my name on who was in particular. Sunlight is the best. People do their dirt in the darkness, and the APA is a spotlight. You can't be anonymous, because we will make sure that we're reporting these crimes to the regulators. If the authorities are not going to prosecute these crimes, or at least do a legitimate investigation, because look, they have a right to say no. Our own lead prosecutor used to say, look, I would turn 10 good cases into my district attorney, and he would maybe take one or two.
Right.
Understandable. But if we're turning in clean cases and they're not even bothering to investigate them, we have a problem. And your constituents, the people that you are hired, elected, or appointed to defend, will know about it. Like I said, we came to fight. You're either going to fight with us or you're going to fight against us, but we represent your constituents. We represent the people you are paid, hired, and elected to defend, and they need to know whether or not you're doing that job ethically, or if you're aligning yourself with the insurance industry, maybe because they're funding your campaign with quite a bit of money.
That's awesome, man. And I really appreciate you taking the time to hang out with us today and to really shed light on what's happening. I mean, again, most contractors know because they're boots on the ground, they feel it. And, the fact of how you guys are spreading the message and the action that you guys are taking is definitely something that the industry certainly needs, especially in today's landscape. Again, for all those dominators out there, I am going to leave a link to not only the resources, but to the website in the show notes, as well as in the video description below. If you're an industry pro, this is an organization that you're going to want to align with. This is something that ultimately is going to benefit you. It's going to benefit your consumer. There's a lot of good things that can come from it. And honestly, each and every single one of us contractor needs that kind of additional support in the industry. So with that, Doug, again, thank you so much for joining us on the show. And as always, hustle, hack, dominate. I will catch you guys on the next one.
You've been listening to Restoration Domination, your #1 resource for tips, tricks, and hacks to help your business grow. Subscribe to our channel and follow us for more Restoration Domination. And follow our host at Rico Garcia Jr. on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn. Till next time, this is Restoration Domination. Hustle, hack, dominate.